When he got on a plane in Portland, Oregon last night, he was just another passenger who gave his name as D.A. Cooper. But today, the description on one wire service, master criminal.
What's up, everyone? Out of all of the hijackings in America, only one has gone unsolved in aviation history. On Wednesday, November 24th of 1971, a man in his mid to late 40s walked into an airport in Portland, Oregon to buy a $20 one-way ticket to Seattle, Washington, using cash and identifying himself as Dan Cooper. He hijacked Flight 305 with Northwest Orient Airlines before collecting a ransom and jumping into the cold, rainy night of the Pacific Northwest and was never seen again. Dan Cooper was carrying a briefcase and a brown paper bag, wearing a business suit, black overcoat, brown loafers, a white shirt, and a black tie, and boarded the Boeing 727 with 42 other people, including passengers and crew members. He was sitting in seat 18C in the back of the plane and ordered a bourbon while waiting for the plane to take off. A little after 3 p.m., the plane was in the air, and Dan Cooper gave one of the flight attendants, Miss Tina Mucklow, a note asking her to sit beside him. She initially thought that he was trying to flirt and put the note into her pocket, dismissing it. Cooper told her, "Miss, you better read that note." And he opened his briefcase to reveal 8 red sticks of what looked like dynamite and an array of wires. The second flight attendant, Florence Schaffner, was given a second note that read, "I want $200,000 in negotiable American currency by 5 p.m. put into a knapsack. I want 2 back parachutes and 2 front parachutes. When we land in Seattle, a fuel truck will be ready to refuel the plane. No funny stuff or I'll do the job." Florence Schaffner went into the cockpit to inform the captain, while Tina Mucklow sat with Cooper. Tina remained with Cooper for the rest of the flight and talked to the cockpit using a telephone that was mounted close by. The captain used their discrete frequency to notify the airline. For about an hour and a half, the plane was in a holding pattern, circling around Seattle while authorities tried to get the ransom and 4 parachutes rounded up. When the flight finally touched down in Seattle at 5:45 p.m., Cooper traded 36 passengers and 2 flight attendants for his ransom requests.
36 passengers got off the jetliner in Seattle last night, left aboard 4 crew members and the hijacker, dressed in a business suit demanding $200,000 and carrying a plain briefcase which he told the crew held explosives. With the full ransom collected from Seattle banks and 4 parachutes aboard, the plane headed for Reno. The crew, here being debriefed by the FBI, was told to fly low over Oregon's flatlands with the flaps down. The speed dropped to 200 miles per hour. Somewhere, the hijacker parachuted away with the money. The crew had little to say.
At this point, most of the passengers hadn't even realized that the plane had been hijacked. Florence Schaffner was sent to retrieve the $10,000 $20 bills and the chutes. The plane was refueled, and Cooper and the 4 crew members took to the sky again at 7:36 p.m., this time heading for Mexico City per Cooper's request. They were also told to remain below 10,000 feet and fly with the landing gear down and leaving the lights off in the cabin. The captain told Cooper that they wouldn't make it all the way to Mexico City without refueling, so they settled on stopping in Reno, Nevada to refuel. Cooper then sent Tina into the cockpit and told her that he was not to be disturbed for the remainder of the flight. The last time she saw Cooper, he was in the aisle putting on a parachute, and it looked like he was preparing to jump. When the flight landed in Reno around 3 hours later, Cooper was gone and there was no sign of him or the briefcase bomb. The FBI swarmed the plane and unfortunately found very little evidence. Before jumping, Cooper took off his tie, which was a black JCPenney clip-on tie with a tie clip on the left side of the tie. The FBI was able to obtain a DNA sample from the tie, as well as 8 cigarette butts that Cooper had left behind before fleeing. The investigation into the case was called NORJAC, standing for Northwest Hijacking, and the investigation would go on for decades without any solid leads. An early wire report of the hijacking misidentified him as D.B. Cooper rather than Dan Cooper, and the name stuck. The 2 flight attendants had spent hours with Dan Cooper on the plane and sat down with sketch artists separately after the plane had landed safely. The sketches that were drawn up by their descriptions are thought to be extremely accurate, and they gave near identical descriptions of Cooper. Dan Cooper was described as being between 5 foot 10 inches tall and 6 foot. He weighed roughly 170 pounds. He was thought to be in his mid to late 40s and had brown eyes and dark hair. They said that he had a deep voice but spoke with no recognizable accent. It's been widely speculated that Dan Cooper was left-handed, as he was seen using his left hand more dominantly when opening his briefcase. The impressive manhunt consisted of helicopters, airplanes, ground troops, and even Boy Scouts. But it would be like finding a needle in a haystack, as they had no way of pinpointing his landing zone. The police released the serial numbers on the $10,000 $20 bills to make it as difficult as possible for Cooper to spend his money. They were starting to see that this would be their best chance at locating him. But it wasn't until 1980, 9 years after the hijacking, before any of the money would turn up. A little boy named Brian was digging in the sand near the Columbia River in Washington and found 3 bundles of weathered $20 bills, but the cash only totaled at $5,880. His parents turned the money in right away, suspecting that it was connected to the hijacking. Although a lot of the bills were severely degraded, sure enough, they were able to match them to the ransom using recorded serial numbers. The FBI scoured the surrounding beaches but found nothing else, and to date, no one has seen Dan Cooper or any more of his money. One popular theory is that D.B. Cooper didn't survive the jump. Of the 2 parachutes he decided to take when he jumped, one was a training chute and was sewn shut, and the other was a military chute that had no way of steering it. It was pitch black outside and raining, and when he jumped, the winds would have been around 200 miles per hour. The winds were so strong that they ripped a manufacturer's sticker off the staircase of the plane, and it was recovered in 1978 directly below the flight path. With the high altitude, cold November weather, and the wind chill, it was estimated that Dan Cooper jumped into negative 70-degree Fahrenheit winds, wearing only a trench coat and loafers. There have been some speculations that Cooper worked for Boeing because the plane that he had hijacked was a Boeing 727, and there were elements found on the tie that he had left behind that were very uncommon in the 70s. But they were used at the Boeing manufacturing plant. The fact that he was wearing a tie suggested that he was some sort of manager or foreman rather than a laborer on the assembly line. Further, he would have been familiar with the Boeing 727 and would have known that there was a safe means of escape through the rear stairway. Leads were tracked all over the United States and Mexico. Around 1,000 people were located as suspects in the hijacking, and all but 24 suspects were able to be eliminated pretty quickly, including a man with the initials DB and the last name Cooper. Let's go over a few of the most popular suspects and theories. Quite possibly my favorite suspect is Kenneth Christensen. He was first looked at as a suspect in 2003, after his brother came forward saying that he believed he was D.B. Cooper. Christensen had been a military paratrooper, and it was suspected that Cooper was as well. Kenny Christensen had worked for Northwest Airlines, both as a flight attendant and a mechanic before and after the hijacking. He was 45 years old at the time of the hijacking and was left-handed. On his deathbed in 1994, Christensen supposedly told his brother that he had a secret. He said, quote, "There is something you should know, but I cannot tell you." After he passed, his family was pleasantly surprised to find over $200,000 in various bank accounts. Kenny also wore a toupee before the skyjacking, but never wore it again after. Christensen didn't fit the physical description of Cooper given by the witnesses. He had less hair than Cooper and was much shorter. Also, the $200,000 in his various bank accounts were traced back to land that he had sold a few years prior. In 1972, Richard Floyd McCoy became one of the first and favorite suspects of the FBI. In April of 1972, only 5 months after Cooper escaped, McCoy was arrested for hijacking a plane in a very similar manner. Like Cooper, McCoy hijacked a Boeing 727 and then parachuted off of it through the rear stairwell. McCoy also requested 4 parachutes and $500,000, and both men had passed the flight attendant a note to identify their intentions. Further, both notes used the same phrase, "no funny stuff." McCoy was also in the military as a helicopter pilot. I think the two men look strikingly similar. What do you guys think? McCoy did survive the jump and evaded capture for 2 full days before being turned in by a neighbor. He was arrested and sentenced to 45 years for the hijacking, but escaped jail the next day. He was apprehended again and escaped again. A few months after his second escape, he was tracked to Virginia Beach, Virginia, and died in a gunfight with FBI agents. He never denied being D.B. Cooper. He only said, "I'm not talking about that." Dwayne Weber first became a suspect in 1995 when he confessed to being Dan Cooper to his wife on his deathbed. After his confession and subsequent death, his wife reached out to the FBI and started to put memories together that supported her late husband's confession. She claimed that Weber had obtained a knee injury that he had always said came from jumping out of a plane. Weber also had a reoccurring nightmare where he would talk in his sleep about leaving fingerprints on the AFT stairs of an airplane. In addition, 6 months before Brian found those 3 wads of cash on that small beach on the river, Weber and his wife had visited a location on the river about 9 miles away. According to his wife, Weber threw a brown paper bag into the water. His wife believes that he had thrown that money. Weber was also in the military and had an extensive criminal record. He was 47 years old in 1971. His wife has since found evidence of several fake IDs with different names and a key to a safety deposit box. In that safety deposit box, she found a magazine idolizing Dan Cooper. On the flip side, Weber's fingerprints didn't match any that were found on the plane, and his DNA did not match the DNA found on Cooper's tie. The last suspect I want to talk about today is a man by the name William Smith. He was first looked at as a suspect in 2018. He was also a World War II veteran and had experience with parachuting. He would have been 43 years old in 1971 and fit the description of Cooper to a T. Smith also went to school with a man named Daniel Cooper, who had passed away in the war. In 1970, the railway company that Smith had worked for all of his life had filed for bankruptcy and he lost his pension, which could have been the motive. In contrast, Smith was from the East Coast, on the opposite side of the country. But working on the railway, he would have come into contact with those rare particles that were found by microscope on Cooper's tie. It's also been speculated that Smith could have gotten away by using his knowledge of the railway system and hopping onto a train. The FBI officially admitted defeat and closed the case in July of 2016 after a 45-year manhunt, but they have said that they are still open to examining new evidence as it's brought forward. The hijacking of Flight 305 is the only unsolved hijacking in American history. The FBI has called their investigation into the case the most exhaustive investigation in its history. While we only briefly talked about a few of the potential suspects today, it could have been anyone, and when it comes to D.B. Cooper, I'm left with far more questions than answers. It's extremely easy to fall down the rabbit hole chasing D.B. Cooper suspects. But I think the mass interest and obsession with this story goes deeper than just D.B. Cooper's identity. He represents more than just an infamous American mystery. Let me know down below your thoughts on Dan Cooper. If you enjoy my videos and want to support my work, Patreon is the best place to do so. The page recently went live and will be full of bonus content and perks. You can suggest future topics to be discussed on the channel, as well as gain early access to my videos and get your name in the credits of each video. Support there goes directly back into the channel to help me evolve the channel and continue to make increasingly interesting content. If you're interested, a link to the page will be in the description box, or you can go to patreon.com/TashaSTwistedT. I hope you all are having a killer day, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Peace and love.